than the gentleman joining us now from Newsmax, Washington, founder and president of Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist. Grover, thanks so much for your time. Good to have you back here on America's Forum.
Absolutely. Good to be with you.
Now, Grover, when you heard about this, that the president wanted to raise taxes, and of course it's played as, quote, raising taxes on the wealthy, what was your reaction?
Well, some people had thought that he might support fundamental tax reform, which he'd talked about in the past but never done for 6 years. With a Republican House and a Republican Senate, there was a possibility that we could reduce marginal rates, do what Reagan did in a bipartisan way, take rates down, broaden the base, no tax increase, but simplify and make the tax code less destructive of economic growth. The president basically threw a hand grenade into that and said, no, I want to have tax and spend, taking taxes up, not down, make them more complicated, not simpler. And he's looking at $320 billion in new tax hikes. He's looking at massive new spending programs. And none of these things will actually pass Congress. He knows that. So he's decided to play politics with the last 2 years of his presidency instead of accomplish something which I guess some of us thought maybe he'd shift from the last 6 years' approach.
And Grover, as you're offering your assessment of what we may hear tonight, we were taking a look at scenes from last year's State of the Union address. This is an annual ritual in Washington, D.C., but one habit this president seems to just be fond of is campaigning instead of governing. He really seems to enjoy the political gamesmanship instead of the hard work of governing. Is that, in essence, what this State of the Union is going to be?
It is, and I think you really hit the nail right on the head, because he's very good at campaigning, and he's not very good at governing. He doesn't like to sit down with congressmen and senators. He doesn't like to work through programs. The 3,000-page Obamacare was written by other people. The stimulus package was written by Democrats and lobbyists in the House and the Senate. Obamacare was written by the Democrats and the lobbyists in the House and the Senate. He's not played any role in governing. He's not good at it. When he's gotten involved in things like some of the budget deals, he sends Biden, his vice president, not him, the vice president. But he likes to campaign because he's good at it. And if you're good at golf, you play a lot of golf. If you're good at campaigning, you campaign. If you're not very good at governing, everything's a campaign. And we've seen him, whenever he gets in trouble or stumbles or things don't go the way he wanted him to, he goes back to being a candidate, not a president. And he spent most of his presidency as a candidate.
Well, one thing we know is he campaigned to fundamentally change America. That included our health care system, a.k.a. Obamacare. And the irony, Grover, and you help me understand this, if you would, please, sir, in the minute that remains. He says middle-class folks are going to get a tax break, but the very people he claims he wants to help are about to get hit with more Obamacare fees and taxes, are they not?
Yes, if he wanted to help middle-income Americans, he could remove and abolish the 7 taxes that target middle-income Americans in Obamacare that he put in. That would be a good start. First, undo the damage he's already done. The mandate makes it more expensive to hire people. That's why so many people have left the workforce. Our unemployment number only looks better than it used to be a couple years ago because we don't count people who've given up looking for work. If we counted them, we'd be up over 10% unemployment.
So you change the way you count, people drop out of the labor force, suddenly they cease to exist. Coming up, more with Grover Norquist, and I certainly appreciate he talked about the 7 hidden fees or taxes of Obamacare. I think in some ways that could be akin to the 7 deadly sins. But be that as it may, more on the State of the Union as a setup. We'll set up to go to break, then come back with more from Grover Norquist here on Newsmax TV. Let's continue our conversation now with Grover Norquist, the founder and president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, you heard Luke Messer. Do you basically agree with what he had to say?
Yeah, it's called trickle-down taxation. You talk about taxing rich people, like the alternative minimum tax was put in 1969 to tax 155 people. It now taxes several million, and if we hadn't made much of the Bush tax cuts permanent, it'd be 30 million people. The tax to pay for the Spanish-American War was only on really rich people 120 years ago who owned phones. Now, and then it shifted to everybody who owned a phone, which was 100% of Americans. And so they take a tax they claim is going to hit rich people, and very quickly it gets everyone. The first tax that Obama raised, the first tax that President Obama increased 16 days into his presidency, was on tobacco. The average tobacco user earns $40,000 a year. The first punch he threw right into middle-income America.
And yet there is always that chorus that tax cuts for the wealthy, always the charge of those on the left. So it is interesting to see how this plays out. Politico, of course, is trying to cast the president in heroic terms, saying that this is, quote, Obama's Robin Hood plan. Do you have a problem with that analogy?
Yeah, because they don't remember their history. Obama is the sheriff of Nottingham who taxes everybody in the village. Robin Hood is the guy who takes the tax money and returns it to the villagers who are being looted by the sheriff of Nottingham. So if we want to go back to that period in English history, Obama's in the castle, he's stealing all the money in tax revenue, and the Robin Hoods are actually the American people demanding they get their money back and not pay as much in taxes as the sheriff of Nottingham, Mr. Obama, demands.
I am so glad, Grover, that you offered that straight talk on what has become Robin Hood revisionism and the proper role of the president really more as the sheriff of Nottingham. Meantime, this president, it's interesting, again, the way the message is controlled. We hear that Congress says no all the time, but now this president is prepared to say no. He says he's going to veto legislation on the XL Keystone Pipeline, Obamacare, and, of course, his own executive amnesty plan. Can he keep this going, saying that he's going to do it his way regardless of the outcome of the most recent midterms?
It's interesting. For the last several years, the narrative that Obama and Senator Harry Reid have put forward is, gee, we'd like to accomplish things, but these Republicans are messing everything up. These Republicans in the Senate somehow are messing everything up. In point of fact, it was Reid who didn't allow votes on the XL pipeline, on drilling in Anwar, on expanding more jobs and opportunities, on the dozens and dozens of laws that were passed in the House of Representatives, but never saw the light of day, never even saw a vote in the Senate. We're now actually going to have a vote in the House and a vote in the Senate on many, many issues. Some of the Democrats will filibuster, but they will have to vote to have a filibuster, so they will have a record. And some of them will go to the president. I think he wants to have no accomplishments, almost no accomplishments in the last 2 years, and then he can try and run in 16 as they ran in 14 and 12. Oh my goodness, the Republicans won't let us do cool stuff. And then, as they did with Obamacare, remember, they never wrote Obamacare down before they got elected. They vaguely said nice things about what they hoped to accomplish, and then they said, oh, by the way, we're going to be taxing 80% of people to provide free and subsidized health care to 20%. We never mentioned that to the 80. He likes to talk about 99 and 1. He's taxing 80% on Obamacare to try and create subsidies for 20%. This is what Gruber, the architect of his plan, described it as, taxing the 80% to subsidize the 20%. We have to lie to the 80% because they're stupid in order to get them to sign up for this, and then we make it all mandatory and call it something else. They didn't do that before the election. They only did it after. They're trying to get through the 2016 election without making it clear who and what they are and what they want to do, because if they told you, they think they wouldn't win in 2016.
And on that note, sorry to interrupt you, Grover Norquist, you have offered quite a preview of what we might hear tonight from the president, or should I say the real story behind the lofty rhetoric that the teleprompter will supply to Mr. Obama. Grover Norquist, as always, you have our thanks, and America's Forum will continue right after this.